The Minnesota Vikings finished the 2024 season with a 14-3 record and made the playoffs for the second time in 3 years. It was a wildly successful season for a team that a lot of people, myself included, thought would miss the playoffs heading into the season. But to the surprise of everyone, they started out 5-0, which included wins over the 49ers, the Texans, and the Packers in Lambeau before beating the Jets in Week 5. They lost their first 2 games off the bye to the Lions and Rams to fall to 5-2, before winning 9 straight games to improve to 14-2, only to face the Lions in Week 18 for not just the NFC North, but the number 1 seed too. Unfortunately for Minnesota, the Lions absolutely dismantled them to the tune of a 31-9 score, and that set up Minnesota for a wild card round game against the Rams. As we know, Minnesota lost in the wild card round to the Rams with a score of 27-9, and for a team that went 14-0 against every team not named the Lions and Rams, their season was over at the snap of a finger. And the Vikings knew they had a lot of work ahead of them heading into the offseason. And here we are, a little over 2 months after the playoff loss to the Rams, and the Minnesota Vikings are doing everything right. And in today's video, we're going to break down how we got here, all of the moves they've made, and why this team is ready to take a big step in 2025. Now let's begin. And we are starting today's video by discussing what the Vikings had to improve on entering the 2025 offseason, and that was the offensive line, and more specifically, the interior offensive line. There were a lot of fun moments for the Vikings throughout the 2024 season, whether it was Justin Jefferson's 97-yard touchdown against the 49ers, or beating the Texans by 27 points, or sweeping the division rival Packers, but when it came hell or high water against the elite of elite teams, the Vikings failed, and pretty spectacularly as they were outscored 58-18 in the final 2 games against the Lions and Rams. Garrett Bradbury was the team's first-round pick back in 2019, and Bradbury's problem since entering the league was he was never a good player. He was always average at best, and that's fine when you are playing teams that do not have a dominant interior defensive line because you can get away with it. But when you play the Jalen Carters and the Dexter Lawrences of the world, who Garrett struggled with big time in the season opener, and to be fair, mostly everyone struggles with Dexter Lawrence, but the point is, you have to upgrade your interior offensive line. 2022 second-round pick Ed Ingram has been one of the most frustrating players to watch over the past few years, whether it was him allowing 11 sacks back in 2022, or him stepping on Kirk Cousins' foot several times during the first 2 years of his career. Both Garrett Bradbury and Ed Ingram had to go, especially with a young quarterback coming in JJ McCarthy. The worst thing a quarterback can have is interior pressure in their face, and repeatedly, and especially for a young quarterback like JJ McCarthy, who is yet to play in a regular season game. So the Vikings went out and signed 2 interior offensive linemen from the Colts in center Ryan Kelly and right guard Will Fries. Ryan Kelly has played in just 24 of 34 possible regular season games over the last 2 years, and there have been some durability concerns, and some Colts fans even thought there was a possibility Kelly would retire at the end of the 2024 season. But when healthy, Ryan Kelly is a really good player, and to put a statistical comparison of Ryan Kelly to Garrett Bradbury from a pass protecting standpoint, well, over the last 2 years, Ryan Kelly has 858 pass blocking snaps and has allowed 18 pressures, whereas in 2024 alone, Garrett Bradbury had 730 pass blocking snaps and allowed 38 pressures. So Kelly had over 125 more pass blocking snaps than Bradbury, yet allowed less than half the pressures. There's a similar comparison between Will Fries and Ed Ingram, who was recently traded to the Texans, but one of the biggest points of emphasis, not just for the Minnesota Vikings, but even a team like the Chicago Bears, is as simple as this thought is: everyone watched the Super Bowl. Not just fans, but every front office member across the NFL too. And one of the biggest takeaways from front offices across the NFL was, we have to protect our quarterback. And I also credit the Bears for bringing in guys like Jonah Jackson, Drew Dahlman, and Joe Thuney over the past couple of weeks. Another benefit to bringing in both Ryan Kelly and Will Fries for the Vikings is it will help out the run game in a big way, and that's something the Vikings desperately needed. Aaron Jones had a really good year for the Vikings last year as he had over 1,500 yards from scrimmage, but the Vikings were not efficiently running the football the way they intended to, as they finished 26th in yards per carry in 2024. And whether the quarterback is JJ McCarthy, a player who has not started an NFL game yet, or a multiple-time league MVP, a good run game is a quarterback's best friend. And not only did they bring back Aaron Jones, but they also traded for former 49ers running back Jordan Mason in what I thought was a tremendous move by Vikings GM Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. One of the biggest reasons why I like the Jordan Mason trade specifically for Minnesota is how they went about acquiring Jordan Mason. It is worth noting Jordan Mason averages over 5 yards per carry lifetime and that he's been in a very good system over the past couple of years, but ultimately it is still on him to produce. But one of the reasons why I like this trade is because they traded former guard Ed Ingram earlier in the week to the Houston Texans for a 2026 6th round pick. Watching Ed Ingram play over the past few years has been incredibly frustrating, and I don't think he is a league average guard, let alone an above average guard. So to be able to flip Ed Ingram for a 6th round pick and then to trade a 6th round pick and to be able to go back 27 spots in the 2025 NFL draft to be able to acquire a pretty solid player at the running back position, to me is a good process. Now, there was some pushback regarding the Jordan Mason trade, basically saying this is a tremendous running back class. Why would you go make this trade whenever you can draft a running back in a month? But what's not guaranteed is the level of play that Jordan Mason has had in the NFL. Even for as good of a prospect as Ashton Jeanty is, it's not guaranteed that he's going to produce at the level Jordan Mason has since he was an undrafted free agent a couple of years ago. I also think it's worth noting that the Vikings would probably not be able to get Ashton Jeanty, as I think there's a solid chance that he goes to either the Raiders at 6 or the Bears at pick 10 in the 2025 draft. And for all of the other good running backs in this class, like Omarion Hampton, Quinshon Judkins, Caleb Johnson, Cam Scatterbo, Bashal Tutin, DJ Giddens, whoever the player is, are they guaranteed to be as good as Jordan Mason in 2025? No, and when you look at what the Vikings have done over the past couple of weeks, they made it pretty clear that they think they are very close to not just winning a playoff game or two, but making a legitimate Super Bowl push. And I would argue for the sake of the 2025 season that Jordan Mason gives them a better chance to go to the Super Bowl based on his production that he would presumably have than any of the guys in the 2025 draft, really outside of Ashton Jeanty and maybe Omarion Hampton. But the one reason that I also like this trade is because the Vikings are not locked into taking a running back early in the 2025 draft. They don't have to take one on day 1 or even day 2 because the trade for Jordan Mason buys them some time. Remember, they have addressed the interior offensive line in a big way, and they will also be getting Christian Darrisaw back, which will be huge for the 2025 season. And Cam Robinson did an okay job of filling in for Christian Darrisaw, but let's call it what it is. If somebody like Penei Sewell goes down for the Lions, or if somebody like Trent Williams goes down for the 49ers, that is a substantial loss for those teams. So whatever player steps in is always going to be at a disadvantage because they are stepping in for an all-pro caliber player. And specifically within the last 2 games of the 2024 season, including the wild card round game against the Rams, Cam Robinson allowed 9 pressures against the Lions in week 18 and 12 pressures in one game against the Los Angeles Rams. So to have Christian Darrisaw, Ryan Kelly, Will Fries, and Brian O'Neill as 4 of your 5 offensive line starters and not have to worry about taking a running back because Aaron Jones is aging and they traded for a good player in Jordan Mason alleviates some of the pressure from the front office to make something happen and to prevent other teams from trading directly in front of the Vikings because everybody knows they need a running back. Now, the Minnesota Vikings are not a perfect football team, nor do I claim them to be, and I don't want that to be the message of today's video either. But to see what the Philadelphia Eagles did over the course of the 2024 season with a dominant both offensive and defensive line, and then to be able to go out and bring in guys like Ryan Kelly and Will Fries, and to be able to replace guys like Garrett Bradbury, Ed Ingram, and Dalton Reisner is a huge step in the right direction, especially while you have a quarterback on the rookie contract. And in the sense of the Vikings doing everything right, I attribute that to the additions along the interior offensive line, the subtractions along the interior offensive line, and being able to bring in guys like Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen in free agency to be able to push the pocket the way the Philadelphia Eagles did in the Super Bowl against the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, it should be noted that Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave are not the players they were earlier in their career, and that's fine, but when you have an edge rushing trio in Jonathan Grenard, Andrew Van Ginkel, and a player who I think will take a big step this year in Dallas Turner, well, it's a pretty good situation for Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave to be in. When the Vikings have you in a 3rd and long situation, there are 5 legit options that can get after the quarterback in 2025, and when you look at what the Eagles just did with their ability to get after the quarterback and to make one of the best quarterbacks we've ever seen be uncomfortable all game and only put up 6 points midway through the 4th quarter, that is what the Vikings are trying to build their team to be like. And whenever you also address the interior offensive line, that has been a struggle for this team for not just 1 or 2 years, but for several years, these are all reasons as to why I think the Vikings are doing everything right. Another reason why the Vikings are doing everything right is as simple as this thought process is: you have to strike while the iron's hot, and the Vikings are coming off of a 14-3 season, and in the first week and change of free agency, they significantly improved the roster. And this is especially critical because I don't think it's crazy to say the NFC North collectively is the best division in football. They had 3 11-plus win teams last year, and I think you can certainly make a case for the NFC West and maybe even the AFC West, but the point is, the NFC North is absolutely loaded, and before the Packers lost their Week 18 game to the Bears, the combined records of everyone they lost to in 2024 was 72-13, as they were swept by both the Lions and Vikings, and of course lost to the Eagles in their season opener down in Brazil. And I know the Packers lost in the wildcard round to the Eagles in a game they turned the ball over 4 times and only put up 10 points, but does anyone look at this team and think to themselves on any given Sunday that we are absolutely going to roll the Green Bay Packers and that they simply do not stand a chance? No. Josh Jacobs just had a season where he had over 1,600 total yards and 16 total touchdowns, and I know they have some questions at receiver as well as corner and even edge, but this is still a very good football team. And for reference, they finished 8th in offensive points per game in 2024 and 6th in defensive points per game allowed in 2024. One of the biggest differences between the 2023 and 2024 Packers was switching from Joe Barry to Jeff Hafley, a defensive coordinator, and the results spoke for themselves. And they're not going anywhere, nor is Detroit, who of course just won 15 games and had one of the most dominant regular seasons we've seen over the past couple of years. I understand and acknowledge that Detroit lost both Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn this offseason, but they didn't lose anybody from the roster to the point where you question if they're going to be able to get back to the playoffs. Now, 15 wins in back-to-back seasons would be difficult for anybody, but this roster is loaded as hell, and they're going to be getting a bunch of guys back defensively. I've said this before, but this roster is so loaded it reminds me of the early 2000s Miami Hurricanes, where you just name players and the list goes on because of how many good players the Lions have. And for Minnesota to try to win the NFC North and ultimately go to the Super Bowl for the first time in over 40 years, the Lions are not going to say, here, we'll take it easy on you. No, it's very much get on our level and compete with us, or get out of the way. And credit to the Lions because they're 4-0 against the Vikings in the last 2 years. Now, the Bears are coming off of a year in which they just went 5-12 and had a lot of things go wrong. Whether it was the Hail Mary against Washington, getting blown out by Arizona the following week, or only putting up 3 points against New England the week after that, it was a tough season for the Bears with seemingly no end. Throw in the Thanksgiving Day game debacle against the Lions and getting blown out by the Vikings on Monday Night Football later in the year, and you get the point. Now, I know the cliche for the Bears over the past couple of years has been that they are off-season champs, and I'm not going to act like I was innocent within that, because I was really excited to see Caleb Williams throw passes to guys like DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, and Keenan Allen, and was, and still am, excited for their future. And like we said earlier, they addressed the interior offensive line in a big way, which was critical for them, and they also brought in Ben Johnson to be the team's next head coach. I don't think it will be a one-year turnaround for the Bears, but to act like they are not going to be a formidable opponent in 2025 is not something I can get behind. They're a solid up-and-coming team, and I think their future is bright too. And this all plays into why teams in the NFC North have to capitalize, because if they don't, you will get ran over. So what can the Vikings do to continue to get better and to continue processing the correct way? Because remember, there's not many holes on the roster at this point in time, and this is all under the assumption that JJ McCarthy will be a solid starting quarterback. And I don't think it's an exaggeration to say this supporting cast, not anything else, I'm not talking about JJ here, but the supporting cast, to me, is the best supporting cast a quarterback has ever had. Whether it's Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, Christian Darrisaw, Brian O'Neill, Kevin O'Connell as the team's play caller and head coach, you get the point. Specifically from a supporting cast in his first career start, I don't think it gets better than this. But what can the Vikings actually do to improve from now till the start of the 2025 season? Well, they only have 4 draft picks and only 2 top 100 picks, so I do think they will trade back from pick 24 to either around the 31 or 32 area, or even the early part of the second round. I don't think they will move out of the top 40, and I think their intentions are to draft either a corner within the top 40 or to draft somebody like Gray Zabel from North Dakota State, who who has offensive line versatility. I think Gray's Abel is a really good offensive line prospect, and I think he would slide right in a left guard, and he would effectively complete the 2025 Vikings offensive line. But what also has to be remembered is this team is set up for not just success in 2025, but future success as well. The contracts that general manager Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is handing out are not bad deals. They're not going to cripple the team in a year or two to the point where they can't pay guys like Jordan Addison or even JJ McCarthy if the time would come, and he would need to be paid because he's playing at a high level. Jonathan Grenard last year was signed for a 4-year, $76 million contract, and he finished top 5 in the NFL in pressures in his first year in Minnesota. Myles Garrett is obviously a better player than Jonathan Grenard, but is he $21 million average annual value better than Jonathan Grenard? I would personally argue no. So when you look at the contracts that the Vikings are handing out, in addition to how much they are improving a team that, again, just went 14-3, guys, I'd be lying if I said I didn't think the Vikings' future was extremely bright. And it's because they've shedded a couple of bad contracts from the Rick Spielman era, and they are rebuilding the team the correct way. This team has came a long way from the 2022 draft, which was Kwesi's first draft as the team's GM, in which they whiffed on nearly every selection and were also fleeced in a trade with the division rival Lions, which enabled them to go up and draft wide receiver Jameson Williams. But the Vikings in the 2025 offseason have done everything right in terms of building around their long-term quarterback, which of course is JJ McCarthy. They still have questions at the backup quarterback position, which I do expect them to go sign somebody like Joe Flacco before the season starts, but in terms of everything that they could have done to help out JJ to build around him in the long run, they have done everything the right way, and the Vikings' future is extremely bright. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, please like and subscribe, as only about 46% of people watching are subscribed. It helps the channel tremendously. Until next time, as always, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.